Welcome to the 2020 Buckeye Book Fair. Thank you for joining us for this series of virtual events with Ohio authors and illustrators. The Buckeye Book Fair provides an annual celebration of literacy through author visits, educational programs for K through 12 students, and events for people of all ages. All of the books featured today and throughout the entire Buckeye Book Fair are available for purchase at buckeyebookfair.org. Should you have any questions for the presenters, please click on the Q&A button and type them in the window that appears, and they'll be answered later in the session. Kate Hoefler has taught writing courses at the University of Michigan as well as at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. Nothing in Common is a tender friendship story that reminds us to always lead with compassion. In this lyrical picture book, two strangers learn about the many ways the world connects us, even if the only thing we have in common is how much we care about someone else. Judy Carey Nevin is currently a library director in Ohio and was an editor at Viking Children's Books, where she specialized in picture and easy-to-read books. Her newest offering, All Kinds of Kindness, showcases how important kindness can be. From optimistic ideas of hope to small acts of goodwill, each scene shares the heart of the story, that kindness makes our world a better place. Jeffrey Ebbeler has illustrated nearly 40 picture books, and he has also designed pop-up books, painted large-scale murals, and sculpted and performed for a marionette theatre. His latest book, The One and Only Dylan St. Clair, tells the story of Dylan, who auditions for the school play with dreams of being the star, but is crushed when he ends up being cast as a squirrel. J Rosen is a native of Columbus and the author, editor, and illustrator of a wide variety of more than 150 books for both children and adults. His latest offering, A Ben of All Trades, The Most Inventive Boyhood of Benjamin Franklin, is a picture book biography that sheds light on this versatile genius and his unconventional path to greatness.
Hello, I'm Judy Carey Nevin, the moderator for today's session, and I'm very happy to be here to talk with our panelists today. I'm going to be asking some questions. We'll have answers from the panelists, but if you have other questions that you're not hearing that you would like to hear people address, please put them in the chat window. We do have someone who will be monitoring the chat, and they will let us know if there's a question for us to address. So we're going to start out by asking each person the same question, asking just when you knew, how you knew that you wanted to do the work you do. So how you knew you wanted to be an illustrator, Jeff, or how you knew you wanted to write, Kate and Michael. So we'll start alphabetically with Jeff. Your last name is the first one. So if you wouldn't mind starting,
sure.
We'll go around that way.
Okay, hi everybody. I have liked drawing my whole life. I come from a family of artistic people. My oldest brother does like video editing and photography. My older sister does ballet. And then the older brother that's closest to me is really good at drawing. And so I was always trying to draw as well as he could. That's sort of what got me practicing drawing all the time. My mom is also an artist. She's a sculptor. She was the art teacher at my grade school. So she taught me a lot about drawing. She used to do after school art classes when I was a kid at my grade school. And I was really, as a kid, I was really into comic books and cartoons and stuff like that. And that's mostly what I was doing when I was a kid, is making up my own comic book characters and my own cartoon strips and stuff like that. When I went to art school, I started noticing that a lot of my favorite comic book artists, like Dave McKeon and John J. Muth, and there's a whole bunch of them, were sort of doing comic books that I was loving, but also starting to do children's books at the same time. And so that's what really got me starting to pay attention to children's book illustration. And so I just started looking into it because I knew I wanted to be an illustrator, but I didn't really know what kind. And I started just seeing all these amazing illustrators doing these books. And so it really got me wanting to do that. after college, I moved to Chicago with my wife, and I got a job as an art director at a children's book publisher. And there, I really sort of learned all the nuts and bolts of putting a book together and designing books and stuff like that, and working with lots of authors and illustrators. And that taught me a whole lot about all the different sorts of approaches of book design, from like working with lots of different people. And as I was doing that, I was putting together my own portfolio so that I could then leave that job eventually and do freelance writing and illustrating on my own. I did illustration for about 10 years doing picture books before I ever got to write any books. So it took me a while to learn to be a writer. I was more focused on being an illustrator at first, and then moved on to writing as I figured it out, which took a lot longer.
Thank you. I'm going to apologize. I'm, as many of us are in this COVID world, my office is in the basement, and our heat is going on and off, on and off. So if you hear any background noises, I apologize. I'm trying to mute in between to minimize, but I'm sorry. Next person we have alphabetically is Kate. Same question for you, please.
Yeah, so, well, it's interesting because if I'm thinking about how, you know, my connection with stories, it started really when I was really young, and it was actually in terms of picture and how I drew, even though nobody would want to see what I draw now. But when I was little, my dad would bring big rolls of paper home. And when I look back on the way that I drew, I used to draw I would draw pictures, but in boxes where a story was progressing. Where, you know, and I think a lot of other kids were just kind of drawing like one house, one tree, and I would draw one house, one tree, and then the next picture would be one house, one tree with changed weather. And it's funny, at the time, I don't think I realized what I was doing, but now when I look back on it, I was changing the picture because in my head there was a story going on. And I would do it in these little boxes. And I probably started doing that when I was 4 and 5. And I think that was when I got my first taste of just the pleasures of being a creator and not just a consumer. But of course it started with my love of reading, that it was a special time with my parents. And I was one of 4 kids. And so it was also just a special time for me to be alone and feel a sense of control over my world. I could go behind a chair with a book. And I wanted the book to keep going. So sometimes when I think back on it, I think sometimes I was even drawing and writing fan fiction, what would be called fan fiction now, because I think good books don't leave you, and you want to continue to live in them and for them to live in you. And so it started very young before I could read. And that's one of the pleasures. I'll wrap up my answer that way. That's one of the pleasures of picture books, that connection we can have when we can't even read. It's so special. What a special art form to be able to do that.
Thank you. And Michael, the same question.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have maybe a more internal response, not that I don't share my colleagues' idea of some, artistic play that made you develop an appetite, feel rewarded by. I think that I've been an observer, not necessarily an outsider, but someone who's just been a curious collector, someone who wanted to be more grown up maybe than I was. Sure, maybe that means I'm precocious, but I also am an undisciplined person in the sense that I almost at the same time drew and painted and wrote poems and, bought my first rapidograph so that I could make all of that look more professional, simply because the line was small and thin and clogged up a lot. Yes, I was a reader, but I was also someone who didn't quite get that the expectations of what a boy growing up in the 60s it wasn't for me so much. So art really was a refuge. And literally in middle school, when the realm of bullying had no limitations back then, I was in the art room. I was in the art room during recess, during lunch period, during study hall, just because that was where I was happiest. And indeed, it was where I felt, protected. So I write and I draw mostly to find to find a place for others in the same way that I found myself in other books and other art. So I do think of what I do as gratifying for me, but also I hope a reach, an offering to young readers, older readers.
Thank you. And I have a funny fan fiction story about my childhood. I did not think I was going to be a writer until, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago. But I wrote a book when I was in second grade. And this plot line was there was a cow who had a new umbrella that she really wanted to show off, but it never rained. So she found a magic pebble and she wished for it to rain. And it rained, rained, and rained so much that she got pneumonia and died. That was my whole story.
Wow.
And the illustration had a little headstone with a little umbrella laying on the ground in front of it. And I have no idea where I know where it came from. Sylvester and the Magic Pebble was my favorite book ever, but I don't know where the whole dying scene came from. I don't know. I was not a dark child. Yeah. I don't know where it came from. We still have it somewhere. We found it in my mother's basement not too long ago, and it just cracked me up. The illustration is my favorite part because, I don't draw now at all. And so just this little headstone. Anyway, so that was my attempt at fan fiction. Was a dying cow.
Yeah, I've been told over the years by many editors, let's not kill off the dog at the end. We don't need to do.
Yep, I killed my cow. So anyway, thank you for that. So now we've already had a hint of it. My question, because I'm sitting with the sound of our heating system. Our next question is, how has the pandemic changed your work? So for me, I'm not writing very much these days, but I'm going to go backwards alphabetical. So we're going to go to you, Michael, with that question, and we'll work our way back around.
So I live in the country by myself, and part of the COVID isolation that many people feel wasn't much of a difference for me. That said, I certainly miss people and sharing with people. But on the reverse of that, I have never written or drawn or painted or sculpted or thrown pottery as much as I have now. In some ways, I don't want to have a moment where I stop and say, wow, this is really a horrible, I just wait, you could go back. And so I look at my day and I see artwork piled on various tables in the garage. I've made a studio. Literally, I made a studio, downstairs, and they are all reaching out to say, pick me. So the other big difference, I think we all know, I'm not doing school visits. I'm not doing readings. I'm not connecting with, readers of any age. And Zoom, while I'm grateful that we had some opportunity, this is the very thing that we most cherish about interaction, and that is reaching someone, listening, catching, being able to identify someone, because that's how I was. I wanted to be in an audience where someone could see, oh my God, you get it. Oh my gosh, it is funny. So onward.
Yes, that's the hardest part for me. It's just like a dead silence. And I'm kind of goofy, and it's kind of fun to hear or see people's faces or whatnot. So I miss that a lot. Okay, Kate, how about you?
Oh, sorry, I'm still thinking about your response. That's so beautiful, and it resonates with me so much. I think that every time I write a book, it's always kind of a showcase of the way that I'm in love with the world. And so when this pandemic happened, for me, it was so much harder to create initially because I found that it was harder to think of those things. They weren't, I think, and people of all ages are listening, and I think people of all ages would understand this part where if you're sad or if you're worried or if you're angry, it's sometimes harder to find that light. So it was kind of harder to write for a while, and I felt a little lost for a while, because I think I was in survival mode, kind of as a human animal, and creating something just wasn't on my mind as much at first. And then it's kind of what Michael was saying. There's something, because I want to find the light, but it has to be honest. It has to be honest. And so I started to realize that, I had to look for it, that's what creates happiness for me. And I think for readers too. And I found that suddenly the need to find that light became even stronger. And so now all of a sudden, Michael, maybe it's like you too, I'm actually even more dedicated now. I mean, the first half of the pandemic, I just was flailing. Then the second, well, I hate to say half because I don't know when it's going to end, but yeah, but this second part of what we've experienced so far, I'm much more disciplined in carving out time for it. And it's actually yet another thing that's beautiful about creating and about creating picture books is it encourages me and forces me to find that honest light, and it is there. And it reminded me, I think, the way that it reminds readers that that there's still as much wonder in the world as there was before any of this began. And so it's been this huge weight off me in a way. And so now I'm just plugging away because it's this beautiful world that I can occupy, that is also this world, but it's with that lens of the wonder. So
that's wonderful. Thank you. I did have one moment too where I have this idea for a manuscript that's COVID related, but I'm struggling because we're still in it and I'm having a problem kind of separating myself to figure out how it would work. So it's in the back of my head, sitting there waiting for things to kind of make sense. Okay, Jeff, how about you?
I relate to a lot of what you guys are saying. It's funny though, because I actually sort of had the opposite experience, because I mean, like all of us, I'm used to working at home all the time. And so usually during the day I'm by myself. But since my kids have been doing homeschooling now, and my wife has been off work because she's a teacher's aide, so they closed down for a long time, I've been surrounded by people. We also got a puppy. So like all at the same time, right when this started, I had like this mass of people that I'm not used to being around during my workday. Which has been challenging and great in lots of different ways. But like you guys were saying with the creativity aspect, I actually had to get out a lot because I'm used to having like a lot of quiet time by myself. So I took lots of long walks in the park nearby, which I never really used to do. And I got so much writing done that there's so many distractions that I'm used to in my studio with my computer and, and all the things, chores and things I could be doing. And actually being forced to get out of the house and just walk around the park for hours, I got so much more like ideas. And I wrote a whole series of these easy reader comics that I was able to get finished and sent out. And it was like this, it was sort of a weird period of extra creativity because I was forced into it. So I don't know.
I mean, Jeffrey, Kate, Judy, I mean, we're all talking, I think, the same language, and that is that art is about resilience. That there's always a different pressure. There's always some kind of limitation. And your role as an artist is to not just react, but, I think we take the moment, we stretch out the time between here's a stimulus and here's my reaction to it. I think art lives in the moment that you pry those two things apart. You think harder, you think longer. And that's the challenge. That's why not everyone's a rocket scientist. That's the challenge. And I love that. I love the problem solving. And anytime it goes too quickly and too easily, I realize I'm missing something. It's not hard enough. I didn't get it.
A really good point. that hits home with me because I was one of those kids who always wrote and didn't really revise. So as a grown up being an author, I come into it with that mindset. And so I really need time to process, but I feel like I shouldn't need it. And so I frequently need that period where I'm mulling. I mull and percolate a lot. And because if I put it out on my computer, I feel like it should be done. And so the mulling happens here before I actually put it on in my computer. But so I'm going to skip some of the questions because I think it's fun to have this round conversation. So I'm going to skip up to the one about having quirks as creators, because I think this conversation might lead nicely into that. We all have our own quirks, things we do that maybe not everybody else does the same way. And I'm wondering if you would share one kind of quirky thing that you do, either part of your process or something that you do that gives you ideas that people might not think about, or just something that might be a little quirky or fun about your process. So I'm going to reverse again. So Jeff, you're going to be first this time. We'll go back around.
I think something that I learned, like I was saying, I illustrated for like 10 years doing books for authors. And the whole time I really wanted to be a writer at the same time. And so it wasn't that I wasn't writing that whole time. I was writing lots of stories. I was doing these really involved book, where I would do a whole book dummy and sketch the whole thing out and write the whole thing out. And I was sending them out over and over again. And it was very frustrating because that whole time I was working with lots of editors. Like I knew editors of several different publishers, that I knew very well, and they just didn't like my stories. And I couldn't really figure out what the deal was. And something that happened at the same time, I started writing a comic series for Ask Magazine. It's called Nestor's Doc. I do it every month, and every month the comic series is about whatever the magazine is about. So, it's some sort of science and nature topic. And a lot of times the topics are kind of dry and not very funny, but I have to come up with a funny, like 2-page comic strip about whatever that topic is. And it was a real challenge to write it because we had to do these, it started off as phone meetings, where there would be I'd be talking to 10 people on the phone. Now we're doing Zoom meetings. But I would have to pitch them, a funny punchline. It had to be kid appropriate. It had to be about the topic in science, and it had to be funny. And so many times when I did that, I would just get dead air. I would tell them a story and I just have to wait as everybody's just not laughing. And so it sort of taught me, because I've been doing it for like 10 years now. It taught me a lot about writing short stories, and figuring out ways to approach a story quickly. And the thing that I do, that I learned after a little while, is that they would send me the topic for the magazine maybe a couple weeks ahead of time, but I wouldn't read it until like an hour before our phone meeting. And then I would pace around the house, and I do that still. Like I save it till the very last minute and like just really stress myself out trying to come up with a good idea. Because if I ever stew on an idea, if I ever read the magazine ahead of time, then I stew on it for days and days, and they're never as good. I've never come up with a good one that everybody reacts well to. It's always like some sort of spontaneous thing that's I have to come up under pressure. And I applied that to the picture books I write now. I don't show anybody, I don't show my family or friends or anybody anything that I'm working on, and I try and get it to my editor as quickly as I can. I'll write the manuscript, and I'll do some quick sketches, and I'll send it out before I have time to worry about it or think about it or revise it to death, because I think it's that spontaneity. Like I tend to kill ideas if I work on them too long. So yeah.
I can identify with that part too, on the spontaneous part too. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kate, how about your quirkiness?
Well, first, Jeff, by the way, I'm the same way I share nothing about what I'm working on, and people in my life just know not to ask. Like they're going to get nothing. And I don't know what it is, but I don't want their feedback. I don't know what it is. I have to be alone with the project so that I don't know. But anyway, but one of my quirks, I attach music and song to each story. And it's usually a classical music. And so for Nothing in Common, it was Philip Glass's Closing from Glassworks. And it was like a duet with that. And each book has had a different song, and it just kind of, I don't know, it puts me in that world, and I'm listening to it over and over and over again as I'm writing. And then some people might not realize that, when you write a book, then you might go, it gets accepted. You might go months before you touch it again, or before you think about revisions, or you're looking at it with the art. And so I can go then months, and then, if I'm gonna look at that story again, I go back into the music, and then I'm back in that world. And it's so powerful for me. That, and then I like to do my actual writing low to the ground on a beanbag. I don't know why, and it's starting to hurt more and more. What I get. So I really need to change that habit. And then I like to go into the woods when I'm thinking. So as soon as I get stuck, I don't force it. I just call it like, I have to empty my brain out. I need a break from it. I need to actually not think about this. But that music quirk, I've heard of, I know a couple other people who do that too, but it was something that developed on its own, and it works really well for me.
I love that. Okay, how about you, Michael?
I think that maybe we could define quirks as learning how you best function. I work best at night. I can only write for this long. I need to see it written out in handwriting before so I've come to know a few things about myself that I've solved, whether you want to call them quirks or bypasses. But I know that I don't get things right away. And it's important to me to be really romantic, excessive, right, try it this way, try the opposite. And then I look and I sort of literally sometimes circle the things that, well, that's more interesting. That's a better. And then I do the classical thing where I shrink it up again and try to say, okay, here's what I do. And then once again, it kind of does that accordion out. I also, because I'm really trained as a poet, love pressure, and know that when you apply pressure, sometimes things sprung, right? They're like, whoops, that doesn't fit anymore. That's too many. And I find that forces me to do things that I hadn't considered. In fact, sometimes I reverse, like I'll have a last line of a poem that says, he did not do this. And then when I revise it, I realize he did do this. Now, what does that make? It introduces an entire other consideration. And to me, then I discover something. Then, so I think I'm quirky in that I need to revel in all of the opportunities and then, kind of settle down. I guess I'm not a settle down kind of guy.
Thank you. I've been sitting here actually, and I can't think of a quirk for myself. I do read my manuscripts out loud, which was something I always recommended when I was an editor, because it really changes your interpretation of your own words when you hear them. So I always read to myself. So I guess that's maybe a quirk, is you see me mumbling because I don't read them like at full voice. I kind of read them to myself as I go along. But it's very important.
As we talked earlier, it's also very good to read your things aloud in an accent of any sort, just because it delights the ear.
Yes, I wish I could do that. I wish I could just push a button and have, my words come out in a different accent. That would be wonderful. I guess I could technically somewhere on the computer, but yes, I would love that. That is a really good idea. I'm going to pursue that one. Yeah, but so I was an editor a long time ago, and before email even was really kind of in common use. I mean, we emailed, but we didn't email with our authors really. So it was phone and letter. back and forth. And whenever I sent a rejection letter, that means it's time for us to start winding down. I would always say, I recommend that you read it out loud to yourself. Sorry, that was my alarm saying, ding, it's time for us to probably do one more quickie question. Quick question. Okay, so I know it's unfair to ask anyone what your favorite book is, so I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, with your current book that you are talking about right now, what is your favorite standalone thing within the book? Not about the book, but so maybe an illustration that you just love because it's perfect for what you feel is the heart of your book, or maybe Jeff, just something, whatever. I'm not going to say what yours could be, but your favorite thing, one just thing that you could say, in just a minute or so about your book. So I forgot what order we went. I think, Michael, you go first.
I have a biography of a moment in Ben Franklin's childhood. And I think what I would point out as a favorite thing is I had no particular interest in Ben Franklin. And I've had no particular interest in any number of subjects that were offered to me. And again, I think that my goal was, where am I going to find my my Archimedean point? How can I get into this thing and move it and find myself in this story? So as it turns out, Ben Franklin was a swimmer. Okay, perfect. I was a swimmer. I found myself, and he was a swimmer when nobody swam. I mean, literally no pools, no bathing suits. If you were in the water, you fell in, or you were rescuing someone. I mean, there's just so, and he was intended to be an indentured kid. Every kid in the colonial times was given a trade. You go work with this person. And he was restless. He was a wool gatherer. He was I want to be a sailor. I want to read. And the discipline of the time was, no, you go and learn how to make little pegs that are this big. You go dip candles and make them this big. So I really appreciated and found for me a story I could tell using Ben Franklin to talk, I guess, about the way that I wanted to be in the world. And I think many of us want to be or need to be encouraged to be. And that is, original, exceed expectations, listen to your, try to honestly pursue rather than live up to just, what's expected.
That's great. Thank you. I identified with the swimmer part because I'm not a swimmer. So I every time he tried out a new way to swim and he put that belt around his ankles, I thought, oh my God, that was horrifying. Okay, Kate, how about you?
So it's this spread and Nothing in Common. And I realized the lighting, everything, nothing's going to give it justice for Karina Lucan's work. She is incredible. But this is the spread in Nothing in Common. It's kind of the most intense moment of connection. And it's breezy and bloomy. People are just going to have to, but it's kind of that moment. Karina worked with a limited palette, but it's that moment in the book where you see kind of those colors come together and share space. And I think that it was really, it really echoes what's going on in the story. And it's sort of that, if we think of it as, and I often think of writers and illustrators as people playing a duet or kind of an orchestra, that's the spread that's like the cymbals going boom, it's that spread. So that's the spread that just took my breath away. I cry at every stage when I get an illustrator's work back, like every stage, the dummy to the, but that made me cry extra hard. So
that's beautiful. I love all of your musical comparisons, especially the cymbals. That's a really powerful way to describe it. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Oh, okay. Never mind. I was gonna try screen sharing something, but I guess it's turned off. Let's see here. Well, I've got these two books that they're out this year, Dylan Sinclair and Feast of Peas. Feast of Peas is my other book that just came out, and it's the second book that I've done with Kashmira Sheth. She's an author from India, and the first book was sort of like modern day family, like Indian American family, but this book is more of like an Indian folktale. It was set in a specific town in India, so I had to do a whole lot of research on the types of clothes and the architecture, like everything about this town in this period of time too, because it's sort of pre-industrial, and it's about this. It's about this guy, Jiva, who's a farmer. He's got a garden where he grows lots of peas, and his neighbor Ruvji is always like sneaking over and stealing all the peas right before they're ready to pick. And so there's this whole back and forth between the two of them about who is stealing the peas, because nobody knows. It's sort of this mystery, and it sort of ends up with this scene that's sort of almost Scooby-Doo-ish, where I don't know if. Where the Ruvji dresses up as a ghost every night and sneaks into the garden and steals all the peas. And Jiva decides that he's going to dress up as a scarecrow and he's going to chase the ghost out. And then they do this whole sort of chase through the town. And then there's sort of, like I was saying, there's sort of the Scooby-Doo moment at the end where like they unmask them and they figure out, who the pea thief is. So I had a lot of fun with this whole thing, just doing all the research to figure out how to make all the clothes look right and all the architecture look right, and period specific and all that sort of thing. It was a lot of fun.
That is awesome. So I guess I don't have any of my books right here because I'm in my husband's office and I didn't think about it, which is bad for me. But I will say that my latest two books are the same illustrator, Susie Hammer. And one of the things that are her trademark are she puts little smiley faces on every single thing she draws, everything in a room, everything. I had a student employee who worked for me once who said that she called them her little elbow macaroni smiles, because everything is like the shape of the little elbow macaroni. And what I love is that even in one spread, it's a board book and she made it almost like mini graphic novel-y. There's like comic book divisions on some of the pages. And so in one spread, the kid gets an ice cream cone and the ice cream on the ice cream cone has a smile. And the point of is that the ice cream falls off. And so when it's on the ground, it's a frown because it fell off. And there are just so many like tiny little details where you think, ha ha ha, she's got smiles on things, but it's more than that. She, the smiles indicate things about what's happening in the rest of the page, about the rest of the text. And she's when you look at surface level, the art is very simple. It's, basic rectangles and circles and things that, kids can actually duplicate, because you could cut out a rectangle, you can cut out a circle, and you can cut out little longer rectangles for legs, arms, and things. So it's really nice because you can show it to a child and say, look, it's a circle, you can make a circle, and things like that. But then when you put it all together and look at what she's made out of the whole thing, it's just really wonderful because there's tiny details. My favorite one in All Kids Are Good Kids is there's this thing where they build forts and then they collapse in a pile. Well, when they've collapsed in their pile, there is a girl who has a bunny hat on and there's a sock sticking off the end of one of the bunny ears. And then at the other end of this pile of children, there's a girl with the matching sock half off her foot and it's like about to fall off. And so when you really look for all these little things, even in a book that's intended for, littles, there are just so many fun pieces that I really appreciate her for that. And with my first two books, which are different, they have a lot of that kind of detail that you hunt for. And I love that. And we have made it all the way almost exactly to our wrap-up time. Without going over, which I think we should all applaud ourselves for because it's very rare for a bunch of talkers to do that. So thank you very much for contributing to our precision. And apparently there were no questions from the audience, so we were able to fill the whole time with our own chatter, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with me and with the audience today. It was a really great conversation.
Thank you, Judy. I think that's a good sign that you provided answers to all the questions the audience had. And to all the participants for participating in the picture book program today. And thank you to all of our authors and illustrators, and especially to Judy Carey Nevin for moderating the session. But to all of you, Kate, Jeff, and Michael.
It was such a pleasure to meet you all. I
Thanks.
really, really
Thanks,
enjoyed
too.
it.
Take care. Stay safe. Be good.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.